Okay, to get started with what goes where on a graph as you're building it, we have to get used to words like independent and dependent variables. So independent and dependent, those are basically in any experiment, you control something, you make something happen, and that is our independent variable. So you're in charge of that one, so you control it. And that can be, let's say you're wanting to grow a plant and how much water you decide to give it. Or maybe even you're timing something. Time actually counts as an independent variable. So you're in charge of how much time you let go by or how often you take measurements or whatever. You're in charge of the time. Now that causes a response, which we call the dependent variable. So because you control something, that causes something to change. So that is your dependent or responding variable. So we have a little, it's called a mnemonic device. It's called dry mix. Dry mix means you can just use that, the letters of dry and the letters of mix, to determine what goes where. So the dependent or the responding variable, well, that goes on the y-axis. So that's your dry, and then your manipulated or your independent variable goes on the x-axis. So just remembering the words dry and mix will help you with that. Now, there is one other little thing that I can add to that to kind of help if you're not sure what's what. I can put an H and a V in front of these, so you can say V dry and H mix, or him X and V dry, whatever you want to do. But that just means horizontal, and that's like your left to right. And this one means vertical, which is your up and your down axis. So if that's an extra thing you want to add to that to help you remember that, that's fine. So what does that all mean? Looking at a graph. So this is where your independent label goes, your independent variable label, and again, units if there are some. That's also called the manipulated variable, so the one you're in control of. And then on the same, or on the y-axis rather, by the way, that's horizontal, and then on the up, down, or vertical one, that's going to be your dependent. And that's also called the responding. I hope you're enjoying all the clicks of my Apple Pencil hitting the screen. And of course, again, units. So one thing I want to kind of go over really quick is the scale. So the scale, remember the number scale we talked about? I want you to look at how that's set up. If you look, every certain number of boxes, it goes up by 20s in this graph. So it goes 20, 40, 60, 80. What I see a lot in students' graphs is that sometimes they'll put, let's say, 20 here, and then they'll skip to like 60 or something like that. It needs to be linear, which means it goes up by the same amount each box every time, and that's for both axes, x and y. You want to go up by the same amount per box, or per, in this case, they've kind of got it marked out in different lines, but each one is 20. Sometimes a lot of the errors happen right here in the beginning where students miscount and they put the wrong scales on there, and you just got to be really careful with that. On the y-axis, this one goes up by 100s. So every 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth box or so is 100. Here it's 20. But what you don't want to do is start out at 1,000, go to 1,100, and then start jumping around and going to 1,300 or 1,500. You don't want to do that. So just make sure you're going up by the same amount of number each time. That's a huge part of graphs, and it causes some issues for a lot of students, especially when you plot your points and draw your lines.